Thank you very much, Dr. Hartro and Professor Barlow. I thank you for inviting me here on behalf of the Iranian Studies and the Armenian Studies program. I think this is the third time or second time or
fourth.
That much? At any rate, I welcome you, ladies and gentlemen, students. The reason why you see these two young men, they're the third generation in my family that have learned this music and is carrying this tradition on. That's number one. Number two, I'm getting up in age and it's time for them to do what I have been doing for the last, we won't talk about it. This evening, I'm going to try to present the roots of Armenian music and also Armenian music in the Middle East. We're going to talk about music Eastern Armenia, Western Armenia, and where it began. Incidentally, the oud, contrary to what many of our people think, although it's not a traditional instrument of Armenia, but it was used in Armenian music and it can be proven. I have books here that show them from the 12th, 13th, 14th century ancient manuscripts. It shows the oud. The oud is an unfretted 12-string instrument. It's 6 strings tuned in double. They're in unison with 2 octaves, 2 octave strings, tuned in fourths. The kanun, which is the lap zither or lap harp, has 78 strings of 3 in unison, and they're struck all 3 together with a finger on, with a ring on the index finger and a pick underneath the ring. These 78 strings, but each string has 3 to 1 tone. So about, what, 3.5 octaves, we'll say? And it's also shown in the ancient manuscripts. These were traditional instruments that were used in Armenia, in the court of the kings, and they were popular, and they're still being used today, although much of the instruments have been modernized. They use modern music. We'll get into that just a little bit later. Excuse me while I put my windows on. First of all, what is music to begin with? It's lyric poetry set to song and to music. Science and art of tones, higher or lower pitch vibrations. Armenians had music before they were Christians. During pagan Armenians' time, they sang and played instruments, and songs were mostly of Greek and Assyrian origin. The national type, or the Armenian, began with the invention of the Armenian alphabet in 405. Types of songs were wedding songs, war songs, love songs, troubadour songs, and songs of the village. The troubadours worked in the courts of the kings. They played different instruments. They also worked in the villages. They sometimes composed the melody and the song simultaneously at the same time and sang them. The best known ones are Jivan, Sayat Nova, Sheram, and there were many. They're called troubadours. They went throughout the country and they sang these songs, and they were also instrumental into making church songs, or traditional church songs. The most important of the church song is sharagan, a compound word, shar meaning row, and agan relating to hymns in forms and use of the Armenian church. So really the purest form of our Armenian music comes from the Armenian church. So this evening, when I'm going to speak about the causes, the modes, the Armenian church uses 8 of the modes known to the Middle Eastern world. They call them in the church Aipsa, Pensa, Kimsa, and there's 8 of them. The Chaz is a noum. It's an ancient musical figure, and they were introduced by Troubadour Vartabet of Daron and arranged the sharagan in pneumatic notation. They were tried to be deciphered by European and Armenian experts, including Gomidats Vartabet. They never fully were able to decipher that system of Chaz that's written above, but they think that it told you the mode, the nuance, the key signature. But in the 1700s, we had a person that looked at those, and his name was Baba Hampartsumian Limonjan. And he saw those modes, and he decided to make a new set of neumes, which is called Hampartsum notes. Until the 1950s, and rarely today, there are some priests and a few people that can still read those Hampartsum notes. In fact, many of the musicians in Constantinople that were not Armenian learned this system because it was so easy to write on a piece of paper. You didn't need a staff. You could write. I've got a book here that has the Hampartsum notes written by an Armenian musician. You're later on welcome to see all these things. One page, if you use Western staff, you would have to write 5 pages of notation by Western notes if you didn't use the Hampartsum notes. It was so simple. A lot of them would hear a melody and just write it down. It's sort of a shorthand thing that they do. In these modes that the church uses, we have what we call also tarsavats, a change in the mode in the middle of the song, but it's done in a way that it melts in and comes back down to the original thing. Now, of the 8 modes, when we do a Middle Eastern, and if anyone was here last week and heard Dr. Chris Shuklian, who studied in Istanbul, he sort of mentioned it, but he's not musical, but he understood and heard it being sung in the churches there. They use the name of these modes that I'm going to mention to you. The modes are major and minor, what they use. The minor one starts with what they call nihaben. called Uşak. More popular, they use in the church, Hicaz. And Hüseyni. Now, the major ones. Ras, Hüzem, Hüseyni Aşiran, and Segya. The first hymns of the church were the chants. So if you go to Armenian morning services, most of those are chants. Chants, in the beginning, they were they sort of made them up and sang, and then later when they put these neumes, they followed these modes. And also, I forgot, in they use what they call in the morning service sabah. So, the modes are very important. When we come to the 19th century, we have the father of Armenian music, Gomidat Svartabed, who was very learned in the Hampartsum notes, because as a young person, he was orphaned, he lost his parents, and they send him to Echmiadzin because he had a beautiful voice and a natural ability for music. And he studied there and he knew the Hampartsum notation very well. Then he was ordained a celibate priest, and later on he went to Germany to learn Western music, and he put the Armenian Mass in a 3-part harmony. When he learned Western music and he put it in harmony, he had to give up these sounds that were half and mini tones. Because in Western music, on the piano, even if you mark a quarter tone, you can't play it because you have a black key and a white key. There's a half step and a whole step. You're not going to play. So some of that stuff was eliminated by going Western music. The Ekmalyan is closer to the modes, and even he is marked in Western music, so he doesn't have the mini tones that I'm talking about. But we'll talk about the tartsavats that's in the chants. Udi Hrant, who was a blind, very famous Armenian Udis, born blind, sang in the church every Sunday. He was a deacon. In fact, he wrote a special Der Vovormia to be sung on the 40th day of his Requiem service. And he made a song, composed a song, a chant, about his life and his wife's life. It's called Khaljit. Khaljit man, which means they were poor. He was a blind Buddhist, and he wrote this chant about his life with his wife. Khaljit means living in our, like a little cottage or a hut. And we're not wealthy, we're poor, but you are the queen of this palace. We work a little bit and we eat a little bit, but you are everything for me. Then the Tarskavats comes in, the change of the mode. He says, I should eat a piece of dry bread with you and a glass of water humbly. And you should eat, and I will get full with you eating, and I will call you my loved one. In the second verse, he says, you're sleeping, but I'm awake, and I'm watching over you with my blind eyes. Your eyes are violet, and your breath is the air of spring. We should not be jealous of those who are richer than us. We shouldn't worry about how much they have and what little we have. Because someday they will look upon our life and they will be jealous of our simple way of life. And we will sing that for you now. I'll sing it for you now. Hamar amen kan Choratu dem kezihen Kavat mı çuranara Tu desyes kıştanam Umudu zanem imbalas Tumkına Açkert arev mayramu Sunçet inzi karnano Çılagarodani Voçarusti voç mer kanzin Orla mer barzuk yankin Harus nagush nahantin. These are the type of chants that were done before, but with the in the mode. And if you heard in the middle there was a change, that's what we call tartsvatsk in our modes. Now will come the time rhythm of Eastern and Western Armenia changes a little bit. Recently, I had some very famous Armenian musicians come, and they want to know about these. They don't use it because since Armenia became Soviet Armenia, the music was very westernized and Russianized, so they don't use the makams at all. They don't use the modes. However, they've heard it, and they come and they want to learn about, and they call them mual. I don't know why they call it mual. That's probably a Persian term, because these are from the ancient Persian names to begin with. Just very recently, I had a man that's teaching dancing in Yerevan. He's a professor. He came, Mr. Hagopian, he says, I understand you have a time that's called Jurjana. We're very interested in this because we don't have it. I said, yes, that's a 10-8 rhythm. He said, can I do a dance step for it? I said, yes. I said, you're doing it, but you're doing it Armenian style to 6/4. It's not 10-8. He said, well, can you do a step? I says, yeah. So he wrote it down. He says, we're very interested in this 10-8 rhythm. And they are interested in going back to the old roots of the traditional Armenian music. Of course, like in anything else, there must be progress in everything, and that's to be accepted. But the roots of it are important also to where it comes from. For instance, we'll do the Western Armenians. There's a song we call Marojan. It's in 10-8. Eastern Armenia, Eastern way because they used the 6. You heard the first way was 10. Okay? In different villages, they had different songs that they used. Some of these songs were tied in religiously, some weren't. For instance, they had songs that were in the 9/8 tempo, and what they're doing is they're stomping on the serpent, the devil. Let's do a 9/8, and I'm sorry that we don't have the dancers to demonstrate also. I see Czar sitting out there, but I spoke of troubadour songs. One of the very famous troubadour is Aşık Şeram. It's in the mode Hijaz, and it's not, most of the time the musicians play a improvised, non-meter, what they call an improvisation. It's called taksim in the Middle Eastern form. Now this has a special form. It's in three parts. The lower part, middle part, you're ascending. And then you have to descend back and weave through different modes, but you have to be careful to come back down into the original mode, which will be Hijaz. And we will do that. I'm going to do the improvisation, and we'll play Aşık Şeram's Bardezum. Now there were also, in Armenian music, it's not only folk music. We have folk music, opera music, we have operetta music, a lot of musicals that were done aside from our religious music. One of the operettas that were, or the plays that were musical, it was very famous, was called Arshin Malalan, and we'd like to play a melody, 6/8 from that. Thank you very much. In the Middle Eastern music, many of the Armenians, the Greeks, and the Assyrians had a big part in composing the Ottoman music prior to the genocide. They were very well-known musicians and composers that hardly get any credit, and today most of them aren't even known. But they were Armenians, and at the time, the best-known one was Tatios Exergian. He was known as Kemani Tatios. Kemani meaning the master of the instrument. When you master of, like they call you Kanoni, whatever your first name is, that's because another master has recognized you as such, and they give you, they pass it down. It's not something that you can say, well, you know, I play this instrument, so I'm a Udi or a Kanoni or whatever. No, it doesn't work that way. All these other great musicians, they see your talent or they see you and they say, we're going to put that title on him. But Tatios composed most of the Ottoman classical music that they enjoy and use still to this day. In the makam of Rast, okay, which is the major, we're going to do his, and this always opens the portion that they're going to play a whole section, and they stay in the same mode. It's like an overture. It's the opening. It opens it up. And usually, the canon, and canon means the law. In Armenian, they say ganon. Canon is the law. He opens up the overture, and whatever makam or whatever mode that he opens, that's what you're going, the rest of the orchestra plays. So, Andrew, since you're the ganon, you play a little bit of Rast for us. Now, on Rast, on this makam, there's a very famous Armenian song that's sung at all kinds of occasions. We're going to play it because it fits in with on this makam, and if you wish to sing with us, that's fine. You can sing along. Church hymns, Christos Badarakyal, is in this same mode. It's in the major Rast mode that they use. Also, it's like a march. They used to use in our church at sometimes cymbals, of which you don't see anymore. You see tzanzas sometimes, no more cymbals. Turning to Eastern Armenia, women had very important part in dances. However, let me remind you that the Armenian women's dances are not shaking or gyrating. They're very, what can I say? They're dainty, very dainty. And one of those songs is called Nazbar.
one of the more popular men's dances is called the kochari. Actually, what kochari is they're mimicking the rams. Usually, the women don't dance this dance, but today, as we progress, they dance it. And there's several forms. Kochari is the real Armenian form. Halay is the Kurdish form. But you have to remember that in the villages, in some villages where Kurds and even Turks and Armenians in peaceful times, in festivals, they danced these songs together. They weren't just all the time enemies. They used to dance songs together. Today, unfortunately, I went to in New York, I went to a Turkish festival, and they're playing and dancing to my father's, from Erzurum, the Erzurum songs. And I approached one of the people and I said, you know, this is an Armenian song. He said, oh no, this Turkish song. I said, what are you talking about? I said, we were there way before you were. How can it be your song? We dance this all the time, this Erzurum songs. I know I have an Erzurum tea sitting over here. At this time, I'm going to change the program a little bit. As you see, my two grandsons are sitting here. Both of them have studied this instrument, as Andrew as well has studied the canon, but they both studied the oud, and they're quite good at it. So I'm going to invite Phillip to do a song. I'm going to trade places with him, and he'll play and sing the song, and he'll explain what he's going to sing for you. My son, Armin, who's their father, is not here. Is he here? Where is he? Oh, he's the second generation. These are the third generation. That's a little soft one.
We discussed a renowned oud player named Udi Hrant. My grandfather performed a chant that he had written. It was one of his most famous Armenian compositions. Another one of his famous Armenian compositions is named Sirun Akhchik. As he alluded to before, there are many different forms of Armenian music. There's folk music, there's music inspired. The folk music would be included in this, but there's the church music, of course, and also a genre which many people in this country call kef music or party music. This is one of Udi Hrant's, shall we say, kef songs, Sirun Akhchik. And the reason why we're going to play this is, Udi Hrant's prominence can't be underrepresented or what's the right word for it? Overstated rather. His oud playing influenced generations of oud players in this country in the last 100 years. Even people today, even youngsters on the East Coast who are learning to play the oud can't help but respect what Udi Hrant did for the instrument. And it's really thanks to the people in this country that this music is still alive. Many of the Armenian songs that you hear at picnics and such, Shek Mazerov, Kale Kale, Sude Sude, were all written in this country by the people who came, and many generations have been influenced by those musicians, and Udi Hrant, of course, is one of them.
While the two brothers accompany one another, I'll take a break. That's a soft one if you want another one.
I'm going to do the same as my brother and honor Udi Hrant by playing another one of his Kef songs, which he wrote later as he came to the United States. Well, I played anyways when he came to the United States, called Parovigar Sirunyar. This was well known by him, made famous by him anyways, when he came here, and it represents his love for a sweet girl.
Thank you, boys.
The songs that we perform for you, these were brought by our grandfathers, our fathers, from their village, from their country. This was a part of their culture. This is the songs they brought. I didn't compose them. I was lucky enough to be born at a time when I played with these older musicians that were here that are all gone now. The music before these Hamparts zum Notes were written, they were learned by rote. They would pass them down, learning how from one musician to the other. However, prior to the Armenian genocide, many Armenian men were able to come to the United States. Some of them came through the American missionaries to get more education with the idea of returning back to their home. Some of them came and were musicians. And then the genocide started and they were not going back. Some of these musicians, and at that time there were very few Armenian girls or women that were here. They were mostly men. So these musicians, they also contributed to our culture. They composed songs and lyrics in Armenian, and in particular there was one, Mr. Shamlian. I met his daughter. I didn't meet him because he had already passed. He was looking to get an Armenian wife, a girl, which not many. Well, it just so happened that this one family brought over a young girl that was a part of their family from the old country, and he fell in love with her. The family was poor. So, with the idea that he was going to marry her, what happened is another man came, and the family was poor, and told the mother or the family, you know, it costs so much to come to America, I'm willing to pay that ticket price if I can marry your daughter. Well, she said, that's great, we'll take it. And that other man fell to one side, Mr. Shamlian. So he wrote a song called Sheg Mazorover. Now this is a true song. Means she had blonde hair. And the song goes, Yar Munei in Shat Pari. I had a sweetheart who was so nice. Zanotatsa Anchal Dari. I met her last year. It goes on like that, and in the third verse, it says, Mayre Bachar Mitka Pochets. The mother changed her mind. Urishin Taramov Zachetz. She sold her for money to someone else. And this is a popular song, and it stayed for years. And we're going to do that for you now. şad şadam over peşeri kuynet kuy haluk nerover Mayra hangart mitka pochet baranu tenel maskachet Mayra bachar hangart het baranu tenel maskachet Urishin teramov zachet ah yarış şegmazer over Gargırdun tuşere hosigner over Çırtunk nerin ham mari ah ham over Peşeri kuynet kuyn kalunk nerover We also have another one, Mr. Karenki Perudian, who was very, very famous, recorded a lot of records, happened to be Dikranagirtsi, if any of you are Dikranagirtsis here. He wrote a song, Kale Kale, about a girl also. We're going to perform that for you, but we need a little help. Start clapping so we can get into the kef move. Ham kuyruk kalktı, ay saçların meçkin çuriz alçı. Hasan kıtpartı, ram kuyruk kalktı, ay saçların meçkin çuriz alçı. De kale kale kale, de kale kale kale, avori galçı. Sirkes midan Before we conclude, it's been, I think we went over time. I want once again to thank Dr. Partro, Professor Barlow for this invitation. If you have any questions in the audience, I'll be glad to answer them if I can. If not, I said that we also have popular music. In the last maybe 30 years, we've moved to more modern and popular music. And this last song we're going to dedicate to Dr. Partro because she likes this song. And I missed out on the first year and I almost didn't get invited back, so we're going to make sure we... And if you wish to dance, you're welcome to.
Yar canım isteyen ardan çulmem, aslan
very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being a very receptive audience. We thank you. Thank you once again, Michael. We also had composers who composed, they were influenced by gypsy musicians. One such musician was Kemani Sominyan. He was blind, and he composed what we call longas. Longas are gypsy-influenced music at a nice tempo. And what we're going to do is he composed in several makams these longas. In the makam Nihavend, we'll do this Nihavend longa for you. Thank you very much. God willing, maybe we can do it again next year, Papa.